What is up, quarantiners? It is, I believe we're going into week 8 of quarantine. It's been about a month now since I've been out of the studio. I was trying to do some work from home and kind of found that with, no work in terms of paid work happening right now, and just, kind of stepping back from everything and taking a break from it all, I found it challenging to jump back in from home. So I'm back in the studio. I've decided I'm going to start skating in every day and see if I can use my time here to really try to work on my process, even though there isn't any work that needs to be done. If I can get in here 5-6 hours a day, Monday through Friday, try to get into a regular rhythm, I think it'll really pay dividends for when things start to pick up again and we're ready to hit the ground running, because we will have the processes in place to be ready to do the work that needs to be done. So I've been working over the past few years on a website that I use to kind of keep track of the things that I need to do, keep track of my thought process, try to do my daily journaling, write down to-dos and check them off as we go and plan out projects and things like that. I'm calling it Serenity. It's at velvetserenity.com. So I think that probably the opportunity in front of me while we're waiting for the economy to pick up again and waiting for opportunities to start working with real life clients again, I think that the opportunity here is to really hone my process and my ability to work consistently, to work in a steady and consistent pace, even throughout this downtime. So I'm going to be focusing on just updating this website and getting it in really tip-top shape so that A, I have, an excuse to work on something every day, and B, I can kind of see the progress that I'm making on a very real project as opposed to just kind of working on, random things here and there. So why don't we jump into it? I've been meaning to implement a goals section to this website. Right now it's kind of just to-dos and journaling, and I, keep track of my finances and do a little bit of research on there as well. I'm building out a client section where I can, keep track of my clients, keep track of future prospects, keep track of, what kind of interactions I'm having with clients so that I can make sure that I'm staying in touch with people on a regular basis. But the goals section, I think, is going to be really powerful for me because it's nice to be able to set yearly goals, weekly goals, and even daily goals, just so that you kind of have something in the back of your head, like this is the priority for today or this week or this year. This is the thing that I want to make sure that I'm constantly coming back to, so that as I get distracted by other ideas or projects or inspirations, I'm always bringing myself back to center in terms of the things that I want to make consistent progress on. So I've been working on a new design for the website in Photoshop, and you can see here is what I'm kind of visualizing for the goals section. So I've got projects up here where I keep track of, the general projects that I'm working on, and each project can have subpages. Then I've got tasks that are on a project by project basis. I've got my journaling here, which is also on a project by project basis. I'm hoping to build out an activity section so I can kind of just at a glance see kind of how much activity I've been doing on the website in terms of journaling, in terms of tasks, and just so that, whenever I log on, I can quickly say, hey, this is how I'm doing this week versus last week. That's definitely something to keep on the back burner. Hopefully I can get to that over the next few days or maybe next week. But for this week, it's going to be all about getting this goals section built out. So goals basically, I think now that I think about it, I actually want to have goals be not just goals in general, but also like I want to have weekly goals, daily goals, and yearly goals. So this is actually going to need to have, I think, 3 tabs here. So why don't we work on the design for that first before we start working on the website backend to actually build this into the website. So here we are on our layers. All right. So here's goal 1, 2, and 3. What we're going to do is we are going to create some space here. Let's add some guides. So that's the top of that. Let's give it about that much space. So we're going to drag goals 1, 2, and 3 down to there. And then in that space, as you can see here, our backgrounds for the goals now are messed up. So let's fix that. Let's get our spacing in here. We've got 760 to 810, I believe. So this is going to get deleted. That looks better. Okay, so for our top tab here, we essentially want to have, let's create a new folder for this. We're going to call it goals tabs. Put it right here. And we'll write some text. We'll say today. Well, let's think this through. So right here we have a navigation where essentially we're able to flip through the weeks. If we have different tabs for today, maybe this should say daily, weekly, and monthly. And if we're on today, it can say today instead of daily. But let's make it just in general say daily. And let's make a new group for that. Daily tab, because we're going to need a background for that. How do we want these tabs to look? So I'm guessing that on goals BG, we're going to move the whole thing down to there. That looks good. And now we still need to extend this one. So it needs to come down to about here. So we're going to extend this part of the background here. That looks good. Now let's figure out what do we want this tab to look like for daily. Let's figure out also what size for these tabs. So we went from 30 pixels to 210. So that's 180 pixels. So 210 and 180 is 310, 390 would be right there. And then this last tab is a little big. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to figure out right here. That's 630 minus 30. So this whole width is 600. So 600 divided by 3 is 200. So this one needs to be at 230. And this one needs to be at 630. No, 430. And now we have even 200 pixels, and 200 pixels for each tab. How is that going to look though? I don't know if we need the tabs to be so large. I think actually we can make them smaller because they don't need to fill up the whole thing. They can just be 1, 2, 3 like that. So let's bring that back to 180 for the daily tab. Let's make this daily tab BG. We will select here. And we're going to use this color background for the active tab. But first we're going to give it a curved border on the top of 5 pixels, but not on the bottom here. So we'll go back and add to that and give that a fill. Make sure that we put it below the text. And why is there a gap? What's going on with my guides? That looks better. How does that look? I'm not a big fan. This needs to be a little lower. And I think let's make it a little brighter. We're on 999. Let's go up to like A9. Let's try B. There. Daily. And so when we're actually clicked on it, it should just say today. I think that will look nice. So today, and then this text here should be Monday, May 4th, 2020. And then as you click these arrows, which that arrow should now come back to be right about there. Then you can flip through the days. So you can go back in days. You can go and look at the goals from yesterday, the goals from the day before, the goals from the day before. Then if you click in the week tab, it'll go back to saying week 52 or whatever the week is of the year. And then you can flip through the weeks. And you can see what your goals were like on the previous weeks, as well as what your goals are for this current week and what your progress is on those. And then the years as well. So let's add tabs now. Let's duplicate this tab. Duplicate group. We'll call this, should we call it week or weekly? What do you guys think? Week or weekly? I think it's going to be daily, weekly, yearly. So weekly. We'll make that below the daily tab. Come on, right there. All right, cool. Then we will move it over. Now, question is, I think actually, you know what? We will hide the background when it's not active. And we will change the text to say weekly. And then we will bring this in about there. And now we're going to duplicate this group and call it yearly. Bring it down below the weekly tab. Except keep it in the group and drag it out to about here. And we will change the text to say yearly. And I also think that the text should be a little bit darker. Let's go back to 99999 for the inactive tabs, so that there's a little bit of differentiation between the active tabs will be a little bit brighter in the text, the inactive tabs will be darker. And we'll call this 999. Okay, that looks good, except there's way too much of a gap between weekly and yearly. So let's bring yearly back over. That looks better. Remember, though, that we are going to have these tab backgrounds, so we don't want them to overlap. So weekly needs to go over more. There. So the tabs should essentially have no space between them, because you'll only have the background for the active tab on at any given time. So that looks good. Awesome. So let's turn off those backgrounds. And let's see how this looks. Boom. Okay, we've got tabs now. We can see today. These are our goals for today. We can see weekly. These are our goals for the week. And then yearly, these would be the goals for the year. Awesome. So as you can see here, new tabs, we will just have this nice light gray text with an empty checkbox. When you check it off and you say this tab has been completed and it was successful, then it becomes green and it gets a check mark. When you reach the end of the day or the week or the year and you feel that you didn't make enough progress on that goal, you didn't accomplish that goal, then you should be able to give it an X and basically say that it wasn't completed and have it turn red, so that as you're flipping through past weeks or days or whatever, you can see how well you're doing on the goals that you're setting for yourself. So we'll have to figure out in terms of the interface, if you click the check mark once, or if you click the empty box once, I think that'll turn it to a green check mark. If you click it again, it'll turn it to a red X. And then if you click it again, it'll uncheck it. So by default, checkboxes in HTML just have an unchecked and a checked state. So we will have to figure out how to implement that with JavaScript to have a third state with a third styling. So essentially just give it different stylings. And also how to pass that to the back end. We're going to have to do this with Ajax, I guess. Asynchronous communication between the front end and the back end, rather than have it submit to a page and come back. But today we're just going to be working on getting the scaffolding in place, so that we just have to think about, each goal needs to essentially be able to say, is this a daily goal? Is this a weekly goal? Or is this a yearly goal? It needs to have a title. Is it going to be a title? Yeah, we can call it a title. Goal title. It needs to have a project, so it's going to belong to a project. You can see that here. This is the project that this goal belongs to. And the nice thing about this is that when I'm on the main projects page, I can see the goals for all of the projects that I have for today. If I click on personal here and look at only the things that are related to the personal project, then I'll just see goals for the personal project down here. So this will all change depending on which project I'm currently clicked on. And then, so goals need to have a state. So that's, we'll call them status, goal status. It's going to be either active, completed, or failed. Failed too dramatic. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. It's going to have a title, and it's going to then belong to projects. And I think that should be all that we need. So let's jump over to the website. So what I like to do on the website is, you can see here, I'm in the Serenity project right now, which is where I keep everything organized around my work on this website. You can see here that these are all the different sections that I've kind of built into the website. And this is what I do is I like to go and create a new section within. This is kind of like a wiki where I kind of outline exactly what the back end for that section is going to look like before I build it, so that I can kind of think it through, write it down, and then I don't get confused when I'm actually doing the implementation. So let's create a new section called goals. Did I not already create one earlier? Let's look at the archives. No, I didn't. Okay, so new goals section. And as you can see on other sections, this is kind of, let's go back to projects, Serenity, here. So that's not a good example. Journal. That's here. So this is what I do. I basically create the model here. I plan it out ahead of time right here. So let's copy that to remind myself exactly how that looks. We'll go back to goals. We will edit the description for this goal. And okay, so the model for the goals is going to just be goal. We're going to have title, which is going to be a string. We're going to have project ID. And that's going to be an integer. That's going to be the ID of the project that this goal belongs to. And we're going to say that that can't be null, so that you can't create a goal that doesn't belong to a project. Because I don't think that that's a functionality that we want to have be possible. I think that makes sense. We can always change that later if we realize that we do need to have goals that aren't part of a project. But I think to start, making them part of a project makes sense. Okay, and then we also need to have the status. So status, I believe in Rails when you have, so normally when it's a checkbox, you would make it a Boolean. Either it's false or it's true. But in this case, we need to have 3 states. So in order to make it 3 states, you need it to be an enumerable. And let's look up how Rails asks you to make an enumerable. So I love the internet. How to create a perfect enum in 5 steps in Rails. So add status. So it's going to, so in this case, he's got a column called catalogs. No, a column in the catalogs model called status, and he's giving it an integer. He's making an integer class. So essentially in our model, then we can define, so in the database, the status is stored as a number. It's going to be 0, 1, or 2. And then in our model for that column in the database, we can say that we can give it actual names, so that I can say that the state, for example, or in our case, the status is a 0 would be incoming, a 1 would be in progress, and a 2 would be finished. And that's a kind of actually exactly what we're going to be doing here. So in this case, integer is how we implement an enumerable. And then we just give it names in the actual code. So in the database, just simple integers. And I think that should be it. And then what I like to do is just kind of start writing out what's going to be in the model itself. So we need to say that it belongs to user, first of all, always, because different users don't want to be able to see each other's goals. It also belongs to project. And then here we make our enum, which is defined like this. Enum, and then the name of the enum is going to be status, which has to match what we named our column in the database. And then these are the names for the different states. So state 0 is going to be active, we could say, meaning you're still working on it. Then we have state 1 is complete, and state 2 is failed. That's so negative. I wonder if there's a better word we can have for that. It doesn't really matter. This is only what's in the code. The user doesn't actually see this. So at least for the back end, we can use that naming, and then, the way we make it, we visualize it for the user. We can worry about that down the road. Although I think the way we've got it visualized in Photoshop makes a lot of sense. So that's essentially what we need for this model. So we've sketched it out. Now we can start implementing it. Rails has a really Ruby on Rails is the back end, the framework that I'm using to build this website. The nice thing about this framework is that it makes it really easy to get up and running with new sections, new parts of your website. It's got something called scaffolding, where with a simple line of code like this, we can say Rails generate scaffold. It's essentially going to create the model, the migration for my database to create the database table or the database column. And then it's also going to create the views on the front end so that we will be able to just with one line of code be up and running with a whole new section of the website that we can then start updating to make it look exactly the way that we want it to look and implement it with the other sections of the website in the way that we saw in the Photoshop document. But at least this will get all the back end up and running with just one line of code. So we're going to generate a scaffold and we're going to call it goals. We're going to tell it to have the following data. So we've got title, string. We've got status, integer. See, this is why I like to sketch it out ahead of time so that I can just refer back to my notes. I've already got it all laid out exactly the way I want it to be. And then when I go to actually implement it in the code, I can just check back to my notes. And then finally, we have a project ID, which is also an integer. We also need a user ID. So we like to put the user ID first. User ID integer. Okay, title string, status integer, project ID integer. And notice how we also wanted to say that the project ID cannot be null. I think we're going to say the same thing for the user ID. User ID not null because it has to belong to a user. If it doesn't belong to a user, it can't exist on the website because that doesn't make any sense. Now, we can't add the not nulls on this one line of code here, so we'll have to go into the migration after we create it and add that. So if I just hit enter right now, you'll see it's going to create all these different files within the website. We've created a migration for the database. That's right. Rails doesn't like you to use plural names for models. Models should have a singular name, so it changed it to be goal instead. The nice thing about Rails is that it picks that stuff up for you and automatically changes it to kind of fit in with the way that they like to have the naming schemes work for things so that it all makes sense as you start building out the website and making it more complex. So notice here we created a model called goal. It creates a test for that model. It creates fixtures. I don't really use tests and fixtures all that much, but they're very handy if you're building a website for a client and you really want to be able to make the code base really robust. So testing is really important for that, but not doing that for this project. Then it also adds the route for the goals, which means that, and when I go to the velvetserenity.com/goals, it'll take you to the controller for goals, and it creates the controller here. Goals controller. Then we've got the different views. We've got the index page. We've got the edit page, meaning you're editing an individual goal. It's got the show page, which is essentially /goals/1 or 2 or 3, which is then showing the data for that specific goal. It's got a new page, which lets you create new goals. And then it's got a form. What is that called? It's a partial. So any view that starts with an underscore is a partial, meaning that it doesn't get displayed on its own, but it gets embedded in other view pages. So you can have that form section embedded on multiple different pages, but that gets embedded on the new page, and it also gets embedded on the edit page. It uses the same section of code for the form, and that's in this partial here. Then we've got our test for the controllers. We've got a helper section in case we want to write specific sections of code that get used in multiple different places on the code. In the code views, you can put that in the helper. And then we got some JSON files, we have a JavaScript file, and we have a style sheet for the goals section. And then, of course, there was a conflict for scaffolds. For the scaffolding style sheet, which already exists, we don't want to replace it, so we'll say no for that. So basically, now we have everything that we need to be up and running. Let's check what that looks like on our local view here. So this is velvetserenity.com, but if we go to localhost :3000, it's a port 3000 on my local computer. I'm running a local version of the website so that I can test the changes that I'm making. So at localhost, we can go to /goals, and now we should be able to see our goals, our new goals section. But of course, you have to run the migration to create the database table first, or the column. So let's open our migration to make sure that we have everything in it that we need. All right, it is 2020-05. There we go. So you see here that it automatically created this migration with this bit of code. It's saying we're going to change our table. We're going to change our database. We're going to create a table called goals. We're going to give it an integer column. We're going to give it a user ID column that's of type integer. We're going to give it a title of type string, a status of type integer, and a project ID of type integer. And I think we said that we wanted user ID to be not null. And I can't remember if you put a comma there. So let's Google that. Rails migration. And then on this page, we can just search for not null to see what the, how that's supposed to be written. Come on, give me an example. I don't see any, oh, okay, that's it. You write null, colon, false. Or, is that a colon? So comma, null, false. And same here, null, false. So now the database will throw an error if you try to create a new goal with a user ID that's nil or a project ID that's nil. So it forces them to have to be associated with a user or a project. So we will close that. Now we can run our migration. Rake db migrate. Getting a lot of warnings here because I upgraded recently to the latest version of Rails, and there's still some, I guess, parts of code that are throwing warnings. It's not a big deal. It looks like our migration ran successfully. So what we can do is we can restart our server and now head back to the website and refresh this page. And now we can see our goals section. So this is just an index page that will list all of the goals. We're not going to really use this page, but it's nice to have it so that you can kind of check it from an admin perspective. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually implement the goals into the individual project pages. So if I go here to personal, I should be able to add a section here that shows the goals for this particular project. But let's go back to the goals scaffold page, and we can create a new goal. And you can see that it's already built in the form. It's already created the form for that goal. Now, here's the thing. We don't actually want to be able to specify the user. The user should be specified based on who's currently logged in. So we're going to have to delete that field. We also need to change status. When you're creating a new goal, you don't set the status. It just creates the goal and it creates it as an active goal. And then on the back end or on the front end, when you check off that goal, you wouldn't do it from the form. You would do it from the list of goals page. So we're going to get rid of that field as well. So this will be a drop down with just a list of all the different projects that it can be a part of. So that you can kind of easily change it to be a different project if you created the goal under the wrong project. Okay, so let's jump into the back end. Let's edit the form for this goal. Views, goals, and then form partial. We're also going to get rid of this error section because I already have that built into the application, or maybe not. We'll keep that. I can't remember if I keep that on other forms, so we can check that later. Let's get rid of the user ID. Then let's add. Okay, so this section here, we're going to copy this from the projects form where you saw that you kind of saw a list of all the different projects that it can be, rather than just having the user type in the ID of the project, because that's not very user friendly. So let's pull up projects form. Okay, so this right here is the drop down for that. So we've got div class field, we've got project ID, but instead of, so this is the label where essentially it says right here, it says project. We want that to say, yeah, project is fine. And then f.number field, no, we want this to be a select. So we'll say that. We will say, it's going to be a collection select, project ID, current user.projects.unarchived, because we don't want to show archived projects here, .order by updated at. So essentially it's going to list them based on which ones have been most recently updated, and that's descending. parents is a bit of code that I wrote to essentially take the title of the current project and include the parent projects if it has parent projects, and then include blank. No, we don't want to include blank for this one. I'm allowing that for regular projects because if it doesn't have a parent project, then that means it is the top level project. Okay, so we won't do include blank, but we will say that the selected one is the one that has already been set. That way, if you're editing a project, it selects the one that it is already set to. So project, or so in this case, it's not project, it is goal.project ID. All right, fingers crossed. Let's see what that looks like. Cool. So now I can make this goal be a part of any of these other projects right here. Now for status, we don't want to be able to edit the status. That's just something that you check off after you've already created the goal. So we will delete that. The status by default should be 0. You know what? We need to change the actual database to make it default to 0. So let's create a new migration. We'll say add default to goals status. So change, let's Google this, Rails add default to column. I do not like this syntax. Let's look at some other examples. Yeah. So this is more similar to what I'm used to seeing. We just say change column, goals. That's the name of the table. Then we've got status is the name of the column. Then we've got the type of the field, integer. Then we say default. And I actually like to write this like this. Let's see if that works. Break db migrate. Yep, looks like that worked. So now we don't have to have the status in the form. When you're creating a new goal, it'll automatically set the status to 0, and then you can change those through the front end without going through the form. So did I already delete the status section? I did. Okay, cool. So that's what it looks like when you create a new goal. Give it a title, give it a project. The project should automatically be checked off depending on what section you're in. Although right now, when you go to create a new goal from here, it doesn't specify the project because we're not within the project section. But when we add the new goal button within each individual project, we will make it set the current project here in this form. So we'll have to figure that out once we actually go and implement this into the projects page. But for now, we can test this with a new goal. We can say test goal in the personal project. And of course, we have an error because we haven't updated the controller to have everything that we need it to have. So you notice here that it's throwing a database error that's saying that the user ID can't be null because we haven't set up the controller to specify what the user ID is. So now we need to go into our controller for goals. And let's pull up another controller to make sure that we are doing all the things that we've done for all the other previous controllers. It's kind of easy just to copy your code from previous projects that you've set up already. So let's look at the projects controller. So notice how at the top, we need to have before action authenticate the user. That basically says that it checks to make sure that you're logged in. If you're not logged in, then you can't view this page at all, or any of these pages in the goals controller. Set the goal. Yeah, that looks great. So let's go down and see what set goal looks like. I believe we've done some edits for that on each individual one. So set project. Yeah. So instead of it just pulling any old goals, we want to pull only the goals that are assigned to this specific user. So we say current user dot goals dot find instead of just goals dot find. Goals dot find would enable you to basically look at any goal and not just goals that are your own goals. Same thing for your index page here. Instead of looking at every goal on the site, we want to look at only the current user goals. Same thing here. When you're creating a new goal, you want to say current user dot goals dot new, and this one as well. This will automatically update the user ID for every goal that gets created or edited or anything else. So yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now we will go back and we'll try this again. Let's go here, we'll refresh this, and what is the problem? Undefined method goals for user. Of course, we have to update our models. So for each model, set model / goal. This is the goals model, and it essentially just defines what the relationships are between goals and other aspects of the site. So we know that a goal belongs to a user. We know that a goal belongs to a project, and I believe that was all. When we sketched out the project, the new goals project here, we said belongs to user, belongs to project, and then we had to have this enum status, which gives names to the different integers that are stored in the database for the status enumerable. So we have active, complete, and failed. Now, we also have to go into the user model and say that a user, you can see here, has many projects, has many to-dos, has many articles, also has many goals. And then we also want to look at the project model. And we have to say it has many goals. Awesome. So let's go back here and refresh that. Boom. Now, when I go to goal / new, it already knows who the user is, and it assigns it to this new goal. It says this new goal is part of the user that is logged in right now. So we'll give it a user ID of whatever that current user's ID is. We also have the project here. Okay, so let's create the title test goal. And boom, now it takes us to the show page. And you can see on the show page here, we have this notice that say the goal is successfully created, but I'd already built that into the application layout. So we don't need to show that twice. So we can delete that from the show page. That's just something that the scaffolding creates new every time. But I like to build it into the application layout instead of having it be a part of each individual layout. Goals show. So here, that notice there, that's gone. Okay, so now this is what the show page looks like for a goal. We're never going to actually show this to a user. This is just kind of an admin backend that gets created by the scaffolding, and it's useful for me to be able to go in and edit goals and play around with it before we start implementing it into the projects page and the way we want the actual users be able to play with goals. So this will enable me to edit the goal. You can see here, I can say that maybe I want this to be part of the Serenity project instead of my personal projects. And then if I click back, it takes me back to the index page, which again is just an admin index page. We're not going to show this to the users. So I can see here, this belongs to user 1. That's me. The title of the goal is test goal. The status is active, and it is a part of project number 1. And then I can click show to look at the show page. I can edit it directly from here, change the project again back to personal. And you'll see here that personal has a project ID of 17, which it now shows here. So goals is fully implemented in terms of being able to create new goals, being able to edit goals. But the views that we have that were built automatically by the scaffolding are obviously not very helpful. So now we need to focus on implementing it on the front end in the way that we sketched out here in Photoshop. So we need to create this section for goals. So we have our one test goal, which I think we made a part of the Serenity project, right? Let's go back to /goals. And, you know, it's actually kind of useful here. Instead of putting the user ID, we can actually put the username. So on the show page, it's displaying the user ID. We could say goal.user. And I can't remember how the user is defined. So let's go back to projects, Serenity, users. This is another reason to have it sketched out, because then you can just quickly check back how you named different column headers. So for example, here we can say username is the text of string that's essentially assigned to each user that they can create for themselves. So instead of displaying the user ID, we can display the username here. So user.user, username, and then you can see that looks like, why didn't it update? Goal.user.username. Am I on the show page? I am. Oh, I'm on the show page. I need to be doing this on the index page. So view index. Boom. Now it shows the username. And for the project, let's show the project name. Goal.project. We had a helper to show the project with the title. So let's pull up the form again. And that was title with parents. Because projects can have parent projects. So boom, there's the project name, or the title of the project. So that's helpful. We also want to do that on the show page. Set a project ID. Let's do project dot title with parents. And then if we go to show, boom, user J Fredson, title test goal, status active. Since this is nice now, because we set these enums in the model to have names instead of just be integers, even though in the database they're stored as integers, it sees that the integer in the database is 0, but we assign 0 to be active. So on the front end, it just displays active. It doesn't display 0. So that's a nice little thing about enumerables in the Rails framework. And then the project title is personal. Okay, so we've got our goals set up and ready to go. Now we have to create the front end for the goals within the individual projects. So this one we say is going to be in the personal project, although I think it should be in the Serenity project. Remember, we're just on our local database here. This isn't on our production website. So it doesn't really matter how we implement things here in terms of the data within this database. But just to make it easier, let's make this test goal part of the Serenity project. And then we're going to go to projects, Serenity, and we're going to implement right here a goals section that looks like this. You'll notice I haven't actually implemented the design for the projects and the tasks in the way that I've done it in Photoshop. That's something that we're going to have to do over the next week or two as well. So we'll add that to the list of things to do. Let's go into the projects show page. And you know what? Let's create, because we are complete with the implementation of the goals backend, let's do a git commit so that is stored, so that any edits we now go and do for the next update that we want to do in terms of implementing it on the front end are kind of in a separate commit, so that we can always roll back those changes if we start to mess something up, and we don't end up rolling back these changes that we just made that we know are in a good state. So git commit implementing goals backend. Done. All right, we won't push that to the server yet because there's no point until we get the front end implemented, because we're not going to be using that back end section for creating goals. So let's look at our projects show page. All right, so this is the page that we're looking at right now. We're looking at projects number 1. This was the first project that I created. It's the Serenity project. It has all these sub-projects, which I call pages, but they're really just technically projects as part of the back end. We've got our to-dos, we've got our journal entries for this project, and now next to the journal entries, if we look in Photoshop, we're going to implement goals right here. Testing? Cool. So we'll notice before the journal section, we want to have a header. So the journal section starts right here. So we will create a header, And this header is going to essentially say the current day. Date dot today. I can't remember how to do this. Let's look that up. Rails display current day. The kind of things you do over and over again, but you never actually remember what the syntax is for it. Hilarious. So let's go to the date section of the Rails API. And I believe if we just say date.new, that'll give us, well, let's try date.today. One nice thing is Rails actually has this IRB command line that you can test things out. So let's say date.today and see what that returns. Beautiful. That returns exactly what we want. So let's just display date.today, and that'll be in an H3 tag. And boom, there it is. Now, obviously, we don't like the way that it's displayed here, so we're going to have to format that. So let's go to Rails date format, find the syntax for that. strftime is the function that we're going to be using. So strftime. And I love the way that these get formatted because you essentially pass it a string to this function. And within these strings, you can basically say, I want to have the name of the day. So let's find that on here. Not the month. Where's the name of the day? Here we go, weekday. We want to do this one right here, the abbreviated name. That's %A. Then we're going to have a space, and we're going to say the name of the month. But we want it to be shortened, so abbreviated, so that's %B. Then we're going to have the day of the month. Day of the month, %E. So we can either have it with a 1 in a 0 in the front if it's like the first or second or third day of the month, or we can have it with no padding, or we can have it blank padding where it puts in it a space. I think we want to have it with no padding, so let's do %-D. And then we're going to have a comma. And then we're going to have the year, the full year. Year with century. Exactly, %Y. Close that string, and let's test that. Boom, Monday, May 4th, 2020. Now, do we want to have the suffix here? I don't think we need to bother with that, because they actually don't implement it as part of this. It gets a little bit more complicated. There is a way to do it, and I forget how to do it, but let's not deal with that right now because it's not important. So we have our title. We're not going to add the ability to flip back and forth between different days just yet. So let's now get the actual goals section implemented. We're going to say H3 goals. And we actually want to put this inside of a row. So we have a scaffolding that we, or skeleton scaffolding that we designed for this, where we can essentially set rows and columns for the view. So we're going to give this a row. And actually the journal is going to be part of this row as well. And then each section within that row, actually, I think that we're going to keep the date outside of that row. Yeah. So goals and journal are both within it, and we need to give them each a section within it. So class 6 columns, I think, except instead of 6, we're going to do 3 columns for goals, which will make it 1/4 of the total size, or maybe 4 columns. Let's make it 1/3 of the total size. If we look on Photoshop here, we have about 1/3 and 2/3. So we'll make it 4 columns. The total is 12 columns. And then journal will be 4 columns. 8 columns. Except you have to spell 8. And boom, we've got our goals section here and our journal section here, exactly how we've laid it out in Photoshop. Obviously, there's a lot more design updates that we need to do to get it looking like the Photoshop document, but at least we are getting it sectioned out correctly so that we can start playing with the way that it's going to look in the layout. So we've got goals, title. Next, we need to have a button to be able to create new goals. So that looks like, I believe we have other examples of that on this page. Right, like so to-dos has a new to-do button. Let's pull the code from that. Let's go to to-dos.new. Right here, link to new to-do. We're going to copy that line, and then we're going to go and we're going to paste it here after goals, and we're going to update it to have the right text. So new goal instead of new to-do. And it's going to link to not new to-do path, but new goal path. Is that new goals path? I think it's goals path, plural. Project ID, we have to pass the project ID of the current project to this goal. That's important because that way when you're on the Serenity project page and you click new goal, it'll automatically fill in the project as being the Serenity project so that you don't have to enter that yourself. Of course, you can change it on the edit page if you want. All right, so we pass the project ID to it. And then we have these classes here. It's a button. It's on the right side. It is using the plus symbol, and it is going to replace the text new goal with that plus symbol. So let's see how that looks. We have an error. Did you mean new goal path? I guess I did. It's not plural. Boom, goals. And so now, why is this being displayed below this? It should be displaying there. I think we need to float our title to the left. That's the reason. So H3 class equals left. That gives it a float of left. And boom, they display on the same row together. Awesome. Now we need to display the individual goals. Div class equals goals list. And we'll give it a clear so that it clears the floats. Okay, so we're going to say project.goals.each do. Something is off on my tab indents. It's indenting with like 4 tabs instead of just 1. Whatever. Let's not get too caught up on that. Okay, so for each goal, we need to display a checkbox tab. Except, can a checkbox have 3 states? Yeah, I think it can. Oh, this is tricky. I'm not sure how to implement this. A checkbox with 3 states, because the HTML checkbox only has 2 states that gets passed to the back end. I think what we need to have is, we'll do a checkbox tag. We'll call it status and goal.status and class. Let's just give it a to-do check class and make it look exactly like the to-do ones that we implemented above. I'm just copying the text, the layout for the to-dos above, and then we'll update that after we get this implemented, just to see what this looks like. So we've got goal.title. I wonder why the checkbox isn't showing up. Checkbox tag status. I'm just taking a look at the way that the to-dos on line 17 up here are designed. So it looks like we have a label. And then within that label, we have the checkbox, we have the title inside of a span, and then we have a link to edit and a link to archive the to-dos. I think maybe we should just copy that exactly. So just for fun, let's give the goals list a class of to-dos list so that it uses the same CSS as, or the same styling as the to-dos list. And then we'll update this after the fact, but just to get it at least displaying nicely, let's copy this label. ID equals goal dash goal dot equals, all right, fine, incomplete to do data.created, if I can spell that, at equals goal.created at to integer. Goal.title. Okay, that gives us our label. And boom, the checkbox. Now the styling doesn't look the same as the to-do styling, probably because I have some class definitions not implemented correctly, but at least we're off to a start. Why did we make this all part of a label? I'm going to have to review. Is there JavaScript for this? Let's look on projects. There is not. What about the application? JavaScript. Turbo links, slide up notice, toggle to do check. So we have this bit of JavaScript right here, which is written actually in CoffeeScript, but same thing basically, that enables us to toggle our to-do checkbox. So we're gonna have to create a new one for toggling our goal check equals data. We're going to pass some data to this function. The element is goal ID plus data.id. So we're going to pass the actual goal object to this function, and then we can find the ID of that goal, and we can then look up the element for that goal by saying the ID of the element, just like this. So next, if, interesting that it gets passed like that, if data completed. So we don't want to say if data completed. Let's just look right here. If data is, or if the status of the to-do is completed, then remove class incomplete and add class complete. Otherwise, meaning that it's not completed, we remove class. So this is essentially adding the classes and removing the classes as you check the box to be completed or incompleted on the to-dos. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do this for goals, and it's going to have three states. It's going to have incomplete is the first state. It's going to have, or I think active is the first state. We called it active. We called it complete, and we called it failed. So we're going to say if data is complete, that's the first thing that you could do. It starts out as active. Then the first time you click it, it will pass complete to this function. And if that happens, if we see that it is completed, we're going to remove class active goal. And we're going to add class complete goal. And otherwise, else if, how do you write else if in CoffeeScript? I guess that's how you do it. Else if the data is failed is the next option. We remove class. So if you click it and you make it failed, it was previously complete. So you're going to remove class complete goal. Then you're going to add class failed goal. Else. Otherwise, maybe we just say else if to be certain. Otherwise, if the current data is active, so we're setting it to active, essentially, we want to remove class failed goal and add class active goal. Okay, so that's the JavaScript. And let's refresh the page and make sure we don't have any syntax errors in our JavaScript. We do not. That's good. So now we can even close that JavaScript, and let's open the style sheet for this. And let's go to do. Awesome. So this right here is our whole section that adds all the styling for these to-do checkboxes. So we're going to create a new one for goals. And we've got and goals. Those are just some comments to separate out my sections in my style sheets. I like to do that so that I can quickly jump between them when I'm trying to find out certain sections within the style sheet that I want to do edits for. So let's add our styling for labels for goals. So we've got goals label. Right, so here we've got on this side, it's to-dos list is the name of the class for to-dos, but we're going to just say goals list. So display inline, we're just going to copy it from the to-dos, and then we'll edit it as necessary for goals. But just to give us a starting point, let's make it look just like the to-dos. Cursor pointer, position, padding left. Then we've got our goals list label, span.label body. Are we actually using that code? Yeah, so you can see here on line 75, we've got a span class label body. That's going to be the title of the goal. And that's going to be display inline block width 85%. Then we got our goals list label dot complete goal. But instead of complete, we're going to say it's not complete. What did we say? Yeah, I think we did say complete. What did we call the different goal states? Projects, Serenity, goals. So it's active, complete, and failed. Okay. So let's start with active. No, active, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any styling. This is for complete. Complete goal, span.label body. Now, instead of giving it a line through, a strike through, which is what we're doing for completed goals, you can see here, if I click this, check it off, it strikes through it. So instead of doing that, we're actually going to change the color to be green. But it's not green. What is the actual color? It is 339900 is the hex code. Whoa, I've got a typo here. Color 339900. And I think that's the only change that happens. Yeah, for the actual label. Doesn't change anything else. Cool. Then we're going to go to goals list label input. What is this? Why is there an input for goals list to-dos? Not sure. We'll copy it for now and we'll figure out what that is later. So that's going to be position absolute, opacity 0. That might be the actual checkbox. Yeah, that's the actual checkbox. So we're going to hide the checkbox, which you can see here. This is the actual basic HTML checkbox, and this is the fancy designed CSS checkbox that I added for the to-dos, which gets a check mark like that. And so we're going to use that style of checkbox for the goals as well, rather than using this default one, which looks different on every browser. It's nice to design them and actually make them look the way that you want across every different browser. So we're going to hide the actual checkbox. We're going to give it a position of absolute, and we're going to give it an opacity of 0. That makes it not show up. And then we can use the before suffix for goals if I can type label, we're going to say content, whoops, right, this is exactly what we're looking for right here. Believe, no, this is what we're looking for. Let's just copy that, paste that here. Let's see what that looks like. That didn't actually do anything because we don't have our CSS, or we don't have our classes specified correctly over here. So we've got goals list, label. What's wrong with this? Why is this saying it's not correct? Oh, our div is not ended there. Syntax error. Ha ha ha. Nice. Okay, so now we have our, we have our styling for goals that looks the same as the to-dos checkbox, but we actually want to make it gray. So what is the color? Not the inside. Let's just use the same color as the actual text of the goal. It's AB, AB, AB. So instead of this blue color border here, we're going to do AB, AB, AB. And boom, that looks great. But instead of 2 pixels, let's maybe try 3 pixels. I think I like a slightly thicker border. And it also looks too big, right? Let's do 12 pixels. Does that look better? Compared to Photoshop, I think we're getting closer. And maybe the smoothing is too much. Border radius of 5 pixels is too much. Let's give it a border radius of 3 pixels. Yeah, I think I like that better. And maybe even 10 pixels instead of 12. There, now we are in business. So when we click this test goal, next we need to give it a different style. So I think in our JavaScript, we said that we were going to, right, so over here for the label, instead of an incomplete to do, we're going to call it, what did we call it in the JavaScript? Let's pull that up. Toggle goal check. Okay, active goal, complete goal. Active goal is going to be the current class. So that's what, then we have goals list label dot complete goal color. Let's get the color from Photoshop. I think this was 339900. If I remember correctly. Yep, 3399. And do we make it bold? No, we don't. And then, oh, right. And then the content on the inside. Well, first let's do the same thing for goals list label dot failed goal. And we're going to make that red, but the actual hex code is C00. Okay, that shouldn't actually change anything here on this page because we need to figure out why this isn't switching the class names of these. So when I click on, oh, you know what? I bet I know why. Over here, we need to add some JavaScript. Yes. So this right here, whoops. Okay, so this right here, this toggle to do check, no, right here. This right here, this is the code that essentially applies all of this to our checkbox. That tells, essentially when you click on the check, that it changes, that it actually applies these changes. So in this case, we want to say goal check on change, except that it's not goal check. What is goal check? To do check. I don't see anything with a class here of to do dash check. Oh, you know what? It's probably the actual checkbox. Class to do check. Okay. So yeah, so that checkbox tag completed to do check. Okay, so let's go back to goals, checkbox tag. We need to add a class. Goal check. And then here in the JavaScript, we say what to do when that checkbox is clicked on. Boolean, if this dot checked 1 or 0. So that's essentially assigning a value of the checkbox. So is the checkbox checked? Give it a true or a false. But in this case, we need to have 3 states. How do we have 3 states with a checkbox? I think basically we need to ignore the underlying checkbox. So instead of on change for the goal checkbox, we're going to say on click. Boolean this. Okay, so then instead of Boolean, we're going to say status equals this dot, let's see, has class name. Has class, I believe we can say. So this dot has class. Let's just say status is blank. So then if this dot has class active goal. Yeah, see, this is all happening in the label, not the actual checkbox. So let's do this on the label, not on the checkbox. Let's say goal dash label. And over here, let's give the label a class of not active goal, but goal dash label. Okay, so if has class active goal. Yeah, right. Status is going to be by default active goal. And then if it has the class of complete goal, then we say status equals complete goal. I got to think this through. I think actually this is what the new status is going to be. So by default, we will give it, well, no. If it has complete goal, then the new status is going to be failed goal. Else if this dot has class failed goal, then the new status is going to be active goal. If this dot has class active goal, then the new status is going to be complete goal. And by default, it will start with just a blank string. So status, okay, so when we click on the goal label, we create a new variable called status with a blank string. If the label currently has the class of active goal, then we set the status to be complete goal. And we also need to, what is the point of this status in the first place? What were we, let's look up here and see what we were actually doing with that Boolean. I don't see that Boolean getting passed to anything. Yeah, I'm just going to write this myself. Okay, we don't even need a status. We're not going to do any of this Ajax stuff just yet. We're just going to implement this on the front end. Okay, so if it has the class of active goal, then this dot remove class active goal, and this dot add class complete goal. So we're essentially toggling the classes on this. So if it has this class of complete goal, then we remove that. and we add the class of failed goal. That's what happens when you click a complete goal. And then this needs to be an else if. Then if it has the class of failed goal, we remove that class. And add active. Let's test this. So I click the label, it should be changing it, but it's not. Goals list label. Just to test this, let's make a styling for not complete goal, but active goal. And let's give it a color pink just for fun. And let's make sure that the class is active goal. And that should become pink, but it's not. Why is it not becoming pink? Label.activeGoal. Color pink. Spect element. Label.activeGoal. Probably because up here we are specifying the color within the label body. Yeah, so right, but this should at least be changing the checkbox. Let's look at that. Spect element, color pink. Oh, it's border color. That's why. Border color pink. Boom. Okay, so that's making our checkbox look like that. If I click this, though, the checkbox should change colors. Come on. Click, click, click. The JavaScript is not working. Any errors in our JavaScript? I'm not seeing any. So what's wrong with our JavaScript? So goal label.onClick. Let's add an alert to the page. And apparently, okay. So dot goal label dot on click. Where's our goal dash label? So the label needs to have a class of goal label. It does. Let's test this out in the console here. Dot on click. I forget how to do this. Word. Unexpected token. So I think it actually, this isn't CoffeeScript, this is regular JavaScript. Alert. Unexpected token. All right, let's look up the syntax. jQuery on click. Okay, so you have to say function. That's annoying. That's for click. Let's do the on method. And let's look at an example. div.on click function. Okay, it's passed in as a parameter. So function That's the actual function. Then we close that. All right. There. So that we know is working. So why isn't it working here? Goal label.onClick function alert we. What is going on here? Stumped. I'm stumped. That definitely works in the console. Let's look in our console at our JavaScript. Toggle goal check function data. That's not the one we're looking for. Oh, you know what I did? I put this inside of my toggle to do check. Huh, hilarious. That's got to go back on an indent. Huh. And now, watch. Nope. Still no. I see. That needs to be inside of this function up here. That should do it. There. All right, cool. So let's get rid of that alert. And let's say if it has active goal, this.has class is not a function. You know what we probably have to do? Probably have to do that to make it JavaScript. To make it jQuery. Yeah, correct. This makes it a jQuery object that enables us to call jQuery classes on them, on this object, instead of just a JavaScript object, which doesn't have the class, these classes, or these functions that I'm calling on this object. And look at that, it changes colors. Yeah. So I have the completed goal label color correct. Let's get rid of this pink nonsense. That's for this, for complete. And then let's do for failed. And the color is CC000. And boom, 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 boom. Weird. From active to failed. That's not right. All right, refresh the page. It should have the class on the label of active goal, except that I believe we want to say goal dot status. Yeah, so instead of just making every goal in the view an active goal to start, we want to actually pull the status of the goal from the database. So we're going to say here goal.status. And then it is underscore goal. So that'll be, for example, active goal. That'll be complete goal or failed goal. All right. Starts out like that. Then it gets the class of failed goal. Why does it get the class of failed goal next? It should get the class of complete goal next. So let's go up to our JavaScript. If it has class active goal, remove class active goal and add class complete goal. Why does it add class failed goal? That should only happen if it has the class complete goal. We can add alerts in between. Has active goal. In this case, it has complete goal and has failed goal. This should give us an alert every time we click on it that tells us what the current active class of it is. Has active goal. That's correct. Has complete goal. Why is that? This should be an else if, not just. So what's interesting, it appears that it's running this if statement, and then it's running this else if statement, which is turning out to be true because we've added the class complete goal, but it shouldn't be running this else if statement if this one was already true. This should only get triggered if this one was false. So maybe my syntax for else if is incorrect. Doesn't look like it. Maybe this is a good question for Stack Overflow. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this code into a question in Stack Overflow. We're running on 2 hours here. What time is it? I think in order to be able to make progress on these videos and doing this daily, I need to kind of set a schedule for myself where I can maybe work for a couple hours. I can film what I'm working on. I can film my thought process for it. And then I have to spend a couple hours before the end of the day editing the video so that I can actually publish these once a day. Obviously, this was a lot of pretty dense coding. And I didn't even get that far in terms of the implementation on the front end. But I think the more important thing here, rather than just like running endless hours of coding, I need to be doing specific concrete amounts of it every day so that we can like really build up a consistent workflow day by day by day and just chip off smaller pieces. I have a tendency to work in like huge uninterrupted bursts where I can just go coding for hours, but then maybe I don't come back to it the next day. I don't come back to it the day after that. So I really think that the way that this is going to be useful for me, if I'm going to be able to do this over the next 4 months, small chunks. So I'm going to try to get into the office every day by 10 a.m., try to wrap up my work by 2 p.m., and then try to spend the last 2 hours just editing the video and then publishing the video that evening. So why don't we call it a wrap here? I'm going to post this question on Stack Overflow to figure out what's going on with this code, because this code looks correct to me. You've got an if statement. The if statement is true. The else statement should never be getting executed when the if statement is true. That's the whole point of an if else statement. So something is happening that is eluding my understanding, because this looks pretty cut and dry that it shouldn't be acting the way it is based on the code here. So I'm going to copy and paste this code into a question on Stack Overflow. You guys can see how I approach problems like this when you're not making any progress on it and it looks like everything is correct, but something is still not working correctly. Sometimes it can be really helpful to have other people take a quick peek at your code and see if there's something that you're missing. So let's copy paste this into a question on Stack Overflow, and then I'm going to wrap this video up for today and hopefully be able to get it edited and published this evening, and then we'll start again tomorrow and pick up where we left off. So let's copy and paste the actual JavaScript from application.self. So we've got right here, I'm not sure why this return is there. It's getting generated by CoffeeScript. I don't think it matters. So we're going to ignore that. Let's go to Stack Overflow. else statement, let's say JavaScript, else statement being executed despite true, if statement being true. And what's nice about Stack Overflow is it actually, once you start typing in the title for your question, it starts pulling up other questions that have been asked previously that look similar. And this first one actually, right here actually looks pretty similar. Let's take a look at that one real quick to make sure that this is in C# though. Yeah, I don't think that's going to apply to us here. I'm not an expert in C#, so I'm not even sure what the syntax differences would be. So I don't think that's going to help us. Let's go ahead and just type in our question. I am implementing a 3-state HTML label with JavaScript that iterates between 3 different CSS class names when the user clicks on the label. I've used a simple if, else if statement to toggle between the 3 class states, but for some reason it is always executing both the first true if statement and then the next else statement, even though it already hit a true if statement first. I'm a bit perplexed how this is happening. As else statements are supposed to be skipped after a true if statement is hit. Here's my code. Code block. Okay, so we use 3 tildes to create a code block and 3 tildes to end it. And this is what my post will look like. Let's add some tags. Scripts. jQuery. Coffee scripts. Let's also say that, so the initial class on the label is active goal. And when I click on it, I see the alert has active goal. And I see that, and then I immediately see another alert has complete goal, which is inside the else if statement after the if statement that is being triggered by the label having the class active goal. What am I doing wrong here? Thanks so much for any insight, any help. All right, we will throw this out to the internet and see if anybody can get some fresh eyes on that and figure out what I'm doing wrong, because this is just a little bizarre. Did this post? There. So hopefully we'll get an answer on that sometime later this evening, and we can take another stab at it tomorrow. So let's, what I like to do here is I go back into the main website that's already built. It's already got everything on it. And let's jump back into the Serenity project. And our to-do for today was to create a goals section. Let's edit this to say create goals backend, because we completed that. And then we can also create another goal or another to-do that says start on goals front end. And we did that. Awesome. So our next to-do is to be able to finish goals. Let's just say work on goals front end implementation. And that'll be our to-do for tomorrow. And let's also say fix bug in goals label toggling. Is that how you spell toggling? Okay, there's no E. So that'll be our first step. We fix that bug. And cool. That will be what we start with tomorrow. There's also a bug on this where my completed to-dos are supposed to drop into the journal. I did this weird coding setup where I created journal days as an object, rather than just in the view showing all the journal entries and to-do entries for any given day. And to-dos, when they get completed, they don't get assigned to a journal day. I forget how that is. Anyway, there's a bug there. Completed to-dos are not showing up in the journal section, so I need to fix that. You know what? Let's make a to-do for that. Fix finished to-dos not showing up in journal. That'll be another good thing to get done. Probably not tomorrow, but at some point this week, perhaps. Okay, so we made some progress on that. We're not going to commit these changes to the website yet because they're not ready to go live. But at least we got this into a good state that we can leave it for now. We can jump back into it tomorrow, and hopefully I can get this this video done. Let's add a little journal entry too. Why not? Implemented backend for goals and started implementation of front end, got stuck with weird JavaScript bug on if else statements for toggling goal states. Posted question to Stack Overflow, so hopefully I'll get some insight on what I'm doing wrong to cause that bug, and I can make more progress on the front end implementation tomorrow. Cool. Well, we are just over 2 hours, so hopefully I can edit this down into, I don't know, a much shorter video than 2 hours of me just rambling about coding. I think the most important thing here, though, is that I'm getting in here every day. I'm doing a couple hours of good focused work on something. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as I'm in here doing something and I'm setting goals, I'm setting to-dos, I'm checking them off, and I'm trying to think about like, what is my longer term strategy, but also what are the things I need to be doing right now today to get work done. And hopefully by making these videos and putting them out every day, it'll be something that you know, other people can find use or inspiration in. And maybe I'll start getting some feedback, because it's always useful to have other people take a look at the work that you're doing, at the way that you're setting goals, at the way that you are, you know, implementing day by day processes in order to make progress on those goals. So yeah, I'd really look forward to getting feedback if you're watching this. And yeah, let me know what you think about this process, and if you find the coding interesting, or if it's just way too deep, and maybe I need to skip through a lot of that stuff and just show the actual implementation of these things. But I had a lot of fun doing it. It was nice getting in front of the computer, getting into the studio, getting out of the house. I'm going to see if I can do this skating twice a day, 11 miles a day. I'm skating down from 125th Street up in West Harlem into East Williamsburg. It's a beautiful skate, but my legs are really feeling it already. I did some long skating over the weekend, and I skated last night, and then I don't usually jump into it first thing in the morning. So it's going to be interesting to see if I can handle the twice a day, 11 miles, or if that's going to wipe me out. So anyway, good to be back in the studio. Good to be doing these videos. Hopefully this can start getting my groove back in quarantine. And yeah, if you're working on something similar in quarantine, let me know. I'd love to see what you're working on. Thanks for taking a look. Peace.